Alastair Finch believed the courtroom was a kingdom, and he was its undisputed king. He stands at the prosecution's table, a monument to mediocrity clad in a suit that cost just enough to look cheap. His shoulders are broad, not from labor, but from the weight of his own self-importance. The fabric strains across his back as he leans forward, his hands planted on the polished wood, knuckles white. He surveys his domain, the worn benches, the bored jury, the trembling public defender, and the men at the center of it all. His target. The air in courtroom 3B of the Oakhaven County Courthouse is always stale, tasting of old paper, cheap floor polish, and forgotten justice. But today, Finch infuses it with something else. A venomous glee. It radiates from him, a palpable heat that makes the already stuffy room feel suffocating. He is a predator who has cornered his prey, and he intends to enjoy the meal. His eyes, small and buried in a fleshy face, fix on the defendant. Sergeant Marcus Thorne. Finch's lips curl into a smirk. It's a practiced expression, one he has honed over 2 decades of breaking spirits for a living. It is a weapon, as sharp and as cruel as any blade. Sergeant, Finch begins, his voice a booming baritone that he knows intimidates. He lets the word hang in the air, dripping with a sarcasm so thick you could taste it. A title of respect. Of honor. Earned, they say, in service to our great nation. He pushes off the table and begins to pace, a lumbering, theatrical walk designed to command all attention. His shoes squeak slightly on the linoleum, a pathetic counterpoint to his grand pronouncements. But what does that title mean when the man wearing it believes it puts him above the law? When he uses that unearned respect as a shield to hide his true nature? He stops directly in front of Marcus Thorne. Marcus sits perfectly still. He is a man carved from stillness, a stark contrast to Finch's blustering motion. His suit, a size too big and a decade out of style, hangs on his lean frame. It is the only suit he owns, bought for a funeral long ago. His hands are resting on his knees, his long fingers laced together. There are scars on those hands, faint white lines against his dark skin, telling stories of a life lived far from this suffocating room. He does not look at Finch. His gaze is fixed on a point on the far wall, his expression unreadable. He has a quiet dignity that seems to enrage the prosecutor more than any outburst ever could. It is a language of defiance that Finch cannot comprehend, and so he must destroy it. Look at him, Finch commands the jury, his arm sweeping out to point a sausage-like finger at Marcus. He sits there, cloaked in a silence he probably thinks is noble. He wants you to see a hero. A soldier. Someone to be pitied, perhaps. Someone to be given the benefit of the doubt. Finch leans in close, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper that still carries to every corner of the room. But I see something else. I see a common thief. A man from a background where taking what isn't yours is just another Tuesday. A man who thought his uniform was a get-out-of-jail-free card. A young woman at the defense table flinches. Sarah Jenkins, the public defender. She is barely 5 years out of law school, her face pale, her file folders trembling in her hands. She looks like a fawn caught in the path of a freight train. She rises, her voice a reedy whisper. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is testifying and making prejudicial statements about my client's background. Judge Wallace, a man whose spine was surgically removed and replaced with a political IOU to Alastair Finch years ago, barely looks up from his crossword puzzle. Overruled. Mr. Finch, proceed. Try to keep it relevant. The last part is said with a weary tone, not as a genuine instruction, but as a perfunctory nod to the concept of procedure. Finch's smirk widens. He gives Sarah a look of withering pity. Sit down, sweetheart. The adults are talking. Sarah's face flushes with a mixture of shame and anger. She sinks back into her chair, defeated. The system is not broken, it is a well-oiled machine designed for this exact purpose. It is working perfectly. Marcus does not react. His composure is a wall of granite. He learned this control in places Finch could not imagine, places where noise meant death and stillness meant survival. He is treating this courtroom like a hostile environment, assessing threats, conserving energy, waiting. Section is not the first time he has been underestimated. It is, in fact, the central theme of his life. People saw his skin, his quiet nature, his humble origins, and they drew their own conclusions. They filled in the blanks with their own prejudices. Finch is just the loudest and most powerful of a long line of them. The prosecutor turns back to the jury. The evidence is clear. $100,000 vanished from the Oak Haven Community Fund. And where did it end up? In an offshore account traced directly to Sergeant Marcus Thorne. He says the name as if it's a curse. The accusation is absurd. Marcus Thorne lives in a two-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. His most valuable possession is a framed photograph of his daughter. The idea that he could orchestrate a complex international financial crime is laughable, yet here, in this room, it is being presented as gospel. Finch drones on, weaving a story of greed and betrayal. He paints Marcus as a cunning predator who used his reputation as a veteran to gain the trust of the community, only to bleed them dry. He presents bank statements with highlighted lines and complicated charts that mean nothing but look impressive. He holds up documents with a flourish, knowing the jury won't understand them, but they will remember the image of his confidence. He is not building a case. He is painting a caricature. A racist bogeyman for the jury to fear. This man served his country, yes, Finch concedes with a magnanimous wave of his hand. And we thank him for his service. But that service does not give him a license to steal from the very people he swore to protect. That service does not wash away the stain of his crime. He walks back to his table and picks up a file. Let's talk about his service. 2 tours. Decorated, I'm told. He opens the file but doesn't look at it. He doesn't need to. This is all for show. But what does that really mean? It means he's trained in deception. In tactics. In taking what he wants by force or by stealth. Is it so hard to believe that he would apply those same skills here, at home? Against us. Against our town. Objection. Sarah Jenkins is on her feet again, her voice shaking but a little stronger this time. Counsel is impugning the character of all military veterans. This is grossly improper. Judge Wallace sighs, annoyed at the interruption. Sustained. Mr. Finch, move on. You're making a meal of this. Finch nods, but the damage is done. The seed is planted. He has twisted Marcus's honor into a weapon against him. He has taken the best part of the man's life and reframed it as a precursor to criminality. He continues for another hour. A relentless, brutal assault on Marcus's character, his life, his very being. He dismisses the defense's arguments before they are even made. He mocks Marcus's alibi. He belittles his lack of sophisticated financial knowledge, twisting it to sound like cunning concealment rather than genuine ignorance. Throughout it all, Marcus Thorne remains silent. He is a stone in the river, feeling the current of Finch's hatred wash over him, but he does not move. He does not yield. Inside, a cold, quiet fire is burning. It is the fire of a man who has seen true evil and knows that this pompous, preening man in a cheap suit, is just a petty imitation. But petty evil can still destroy lives. Finch moves toward his closing remarks. He senses victory. He can feel the jury leaning his way. They are good people, mostly, but they are susceptible to fear, and Finch is a master at selling it. This isn't just about money, Finch booms, his voice rising in a crescendo of false righteousness. It's about trust. It's about the soul of our community. Who can we trust if not our heroes? And when a hero falls, when he reveals himself to be nothing but a wolf in sheep's clothing, he must be punished. Swiftly. Severely. He raises the stakes, his eyes gleaming with malice. The state recommends the maximum sentence. 20 years. 20 years for him to sit in a cell and reflect on his betrayal. We must send a message. A message that no one, no matter their history or their uniform, is above the law in Oak Haven. He pauses, letting the weight of the threat settle in the room. 20 years. A lifetime. Enough time for Marcus's daughter to grow up, get married, and have children of her own, all while her father wastes away in a cage. Marcus's jaw clenches. A muscle twitches in his cheek. It is the first crack in his iron facade. Finch sees it and mistakes it for fear. He moves in for the kill. This is the moment he has been waiting for. The moment he crosses the line from prosecution to pure, unadulterated cruelty. He talks about his family, Finch says, his voice dripping with contempt. He has a daughter, I believe. A little girl named Maya. He says her name, and something in Marcus finally breaks. Not his control, but a seal on his patience. His eyes slowly lift from the far wall and lock onto Alistair Finch. For the first time, the prosecutor feels the full, undivided attention of the men he has been tormenting. The air changes. The gaze is not one of hatred or fear. It is something far colder, far more ancient. It is the look of a soldier assessing a target, calculating range and trajectory. It is utterly devoid of emotion, and it is the most terrifying thing Alistair Finch has ever seen. He falters for a fraction of a second, his well-rehearsed lines catching in his throat. But his arrogance quickly reasserts itself. He mistakes the stillness for weakness. He plows ahead, straight into the trap. He pretends to be a father, Finch sneers, recovering his momentum. But what kind of father abandons his child for a briefcase full of cash? What kind of man looks his little girl in the eye, knowing he has stolen from his neighbors to line his own pockets? He's not a father. He's a disgrace. A disgrace to his uniform, a disgrace to his community, and a disgrace to that little girl who will now have to grow up knowing her daddy is nothing but a common criminal. That was it. The line. Marcus Thorne does not move. He does not speak. He simply holds Finch's gaze. And in that silent, unnerving stare, Alistair Finch's world begins to unravel. He just doesn't know it yet. Judge Wallace clears his throat, eager to wrap things up. Mr. Finch, are you concluded? Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution rests. Finch says it with a final, triumphant flourish, though the coldness of Marcus's stare has left a small, unsettling chill in his gut. Very well, the judge intones. The jury will now. Boom. The sound is not a gunshot, but it has the same effect. It is the sound of the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom being thrown open with such force that they slam against the walls. Every head in the room whips around. Framed in the doorway are three figures. Two are dressed in dark, impeccably tailored suits, their postures rigid, their eyes scanning the room with a professional, dispassionate intensity. They are the kind of men who blend into any background until the moment they choose not to. Between them stands a man who commands attention without demanding it. He is older, perhaps in his late 60s, with a shock of silver hair cut in a severe military style. He wears a suit that costs more than Alistair Finch's car, but it is the man, not the suit, that radiates power. His face is a roadmap of discipline and hard decisions. His back is ramrod straight. His eyes, a piercing blue, seem to miss nothing. He is a man made of steel and principle, a living embodiment of authority. He takes a single step into the courtroom, and the entire atmosphere shifts. The stale air crackles with new energy. The oppressive weight of Finch's ego is suddenly, inexplicably, lifted. The man begins to walk down the central aisle. His footsteps are measured, deliberate, echoing on the worn floor. They are the only sound in the now dead silent room. He walks not with the arrogance of a bully like Finch, but with the unshakable confidence of a man who knows he belongs exactly where he is, and that everyone else is on his time. Finch stares, his mouth slightly agape. Who is this man? He looks vaguely familiar, like someone seen on television or in a newspaper, but he can't place him. Judge Wallace, for his part, is flustered. This is an unspeakable breach of his courtroom's decorum. Order, he sputters, his voice lacking its usual authority. Who are you? You cannot just barge into my courtroom. The man does not stop walking. He doesn't even look at the judge. His piercing blue eyes are locked on one person and one person only, Sergeant Marcus Thorne. As he reaches the defense table, he gives Marcus a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It is a nod of respect. Of camaraderie. Of a shared purpose finally reaching its conclusion. Marcus, for the first time, allows a flicker of emotion to show on his face. It is not a smile, but a deep, profound sense of relief. The cavalry has arrived. The silver-haired man finally turns his attention to the bench, his gaze sweeping over Judge Wallace and Alistair Finch, dismissing them as minor obstacles. My apologies for the interruption, Your Honor, he says, his voice calm, clear, and carrying an authority that makes the judge's gavel seem like a child's toy. But this farce has gone on long enough. Finch finds his voice, sputtering with indignation. This is a court of law. You have no right. The man's eyes snap to Finch. The full force of his presence, previously diffuse, now focuses on the prosecutor like a laser. Finch physically recoils, taking a half step back. He feels pinned, examined, and found wanting. "My name," the man states, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone, "is General James Harding. Retired. And for the last 18 months, I have been acting as a special consultant to the United States Department of Justice." A collective gasp ripples through the courtroom. General Harding. Ironclad Harding. A living legend. A man who had commanded armies, advised presidents, and whose integrity was considered absolute. Finch's face drains of color. The ruddy confidence that had defined him just moments before evaporates, leaving behind a pasty, sweating mask of fear. His mind races, trying to connect the dots, but all it can produce is a blaring siren of panic. Harding gestures to the two men who entered with him. They step forward, their movements fluid and economical. One of them opens his jacket, revealing the badge clipped to his belt. "These," Harding continues, his voice as cold and hard as his nickname, "are Special Agents Miller and Ross of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And this," he says, his gaze returning to the judge, "is no longer your courtroom. As of this moment, it is a federal crime scene. The power shift is absolute. It is a tectonic event, reshaping the landscape of the room in an instant. Alastair Finch, the king, is suddenly a peasant. Judge Wallace, the master of his domain, is a trespasser." Sarah Jenkins stares, her mouth open, her mind struggling to process the seismic event that has just occurred. She looks at Marcus, who now seems to be radiating a quiet strength. He is no longer the victim. He was never the victim. He was the bait. What is the meaning of this? Judge Wallace stammers, his face a mottled purple. "Jurisdiction, federal mandate, you can't." Agent Miller, the taller of the two FBI agents, steps forward and places a thick, leather-bound portfolio on the judge's bench with a heavy thud. "You'll find our mandate and the federal warrant signed by a magistrate of the U. South District Court inside, Your Honor. It grants us full authority to take command of these proceedings." The words are respectful. The tone is not. General Harding turns his attention back to Finch, who is now visibly trembling. The bully has been confronted by a bigger power, and his facade has shattered. "Mr. Finch," Harding begins, his voice deceptively soft. "You've been putting on quite a show. A masterful performance of prejudice and prosecutorial misconduct. Truly, one for the books." He takes a step closer to the prosecution's table. Finch takes a step back. "You stand here and you speak of justice," Harding continues, his voice rising, each word a hammer blow. "You speak of honor. You speak of protecting this community. But you know nothing of these things. You are a cancer. A corruption that has been allowed to fester in the heart of this town for far too long." Harding walks over to the defense table and places a hand on Marcus Thorne's shoulder. "You wanted to make an example of this man. Well, you're about to get your wish. An example is going to be made here today. But it won't be him." He turns to address the entire courtroom, his voice ringing with righteous fury. "For the past year and a half, Sergeant Marcus Thorne has not been a defendant. He has been an operative. A volunteer, working at great personal risk with a joint DOJ and FBI task force in an investigation we called Operation Clean Sweep. The name hangs in the air, ominous and final. An investigation," Harding clarifies, his eyes boring into Finch, "into you, Mr. Finch. Into you, Judge Wallace. Into the entire corrupt enterprise you have been running out of this courthouse for the last 15 years. The room erupts in chaos. The jury members are talking to each other, the press gallery is a frenzy of reporters scrambling for their phones, and Finch is staring at Marcus with a look of pure, uncomprehending horror. The men he had mocked. The men he had belittled. The men he saw as nothing more than a stepping stone, a statistic, a notch on his belt. He had been the instrument of his own doom. This is a lie. A setup." Finch shrieks, his voice a high-pitched whine. He points a shaking finger at Marcus. "He's a criminal. I have evidence." "Your evidence," Harding says with a cold smile, "is a work of fiction. A carefully constructed narrative you built to frame an innocent man. The problem for you is, we have the truth." He nods to Agent Ross. The agent walks to a nearby table and sets up a small laptop and a speaker system. The process is swift, efficient, and terrifying in its professionalism. "Let's start dismantling your lies, shall we, Alistair?" Harding says, using Finch's first name with a familiarity that sounds like a death sentence. "Let's begin with the irrefutable financial records." He produces a binder, identical to the one given to the judge. He opens it. "Your star witness, the accountant who supposedly traced the funds to Sergeant Thorne. His name is Arthur Pence. Mr. Pence has been in federal protective custody for 3 weeks. He has provided us with a full confession. He details how you and your primary benefactor, Mr. Robert Sterling, coerced him into fabricating every single document you presented to this court." Finch's face goes white. Robert Sterling was the town's wealthiest businessman, a man considered untouchable. He was the source of Finch's power, his money, his influence. "Mr. Pence also provided us with the original, untampered records," Harding continues, his voice relentless. "They show the $100,000 being transferred not to Sergeant Thorne, but to a shell corporation owned by Robert Sterling. It seems he was using the community fund as his personal piggy bank." Finch stammers, That's his word against mine. A desperate man trying to save himself." "We thought you might say that," Harding replies smoothly. "Which is why Mr. Pence was kind enough to wear a wire during his last meeting with you." Agent Ross presses a key on the laptop. Finch's voice, unmistakable and arrogant, fills the courtroom from the small speakers. It is tinny, but the words are chillingly clear. "Don't worry about the soldier boy, Arthur. He's the perfect patsy. A black veteran with no resources. Nobody will look twice. I'll paint him as a disgruntled, greedy thug, and the jury will eat it up. He'll be in a cell before Christmas, and will be richer for it. Just stick to the story." The recording clicks off. The silence that follows is absolute. It is the silence of a tomb. Finch's own words have just buried him alive. He looks around desperately, his eyes wild with panic. He looks at the jury, their faces a mixture of shock and disgust. He looks at the judge, who has slumped in his chair, his face ashen. There is no escape. You can't use that." Finch gasps. "It's inadmissible. Illegal recording." "Perfectly legal, Alistair," Harding says, almost gently. "A federal warrant and the full cooperation of one party. We checked all the boxes. We are very, very thorough." Finch's composure finally shatters completely. The mask of the powerful prosecutor falls away, revealing the sniveling, terrified coward beneath. "Wallace, do something," he shrieks at the judge. "This is my courtroom. Stop them." Judge Wallace looks at Finch with eyes full of pure terror. He knows it's over for him, too. He shakes his head slowly, a man already defeated. "But we're not done," Harding says, his voice like a surgeon's scalpel, coolly dissecting the prosecutor's world. "Let's talk about the evidence tampering. The exculpatory evidence that your office conveniently lost." He gestures toward the back of the courtroom. Another figure steps forward. It is one of Finch's own junior prosecutors, a young man named Peterson. His face is pale, and he refuses to look at his boss. "Mr. Peterson here came to us 2 months ago," Harding explains. "His conscience, it seems, finally won out over his fear of you. He provided us with copies of the original files. The ones showing security footage of Sergeant Thorne at a VA hospital 50 miles away at the exact time of the alleged bank transfer. The ones with sworn affidavits from 3 witnesses confirming his alibi." Peterson hands a stack of papers to Agent Miller, who places them on the prosecution's table in front of the catatonic Finch. Proof of his own corruption, laid bare for all to see. "He framed me," Finch yells, pointing a trembling finger at Peterson. "He's trying to save his own skin." "He already has," Harding says calmly. "He cut a deal. Full immunity in exchange for his testimony against you, Judge Wallace, and Mr. Sterling. It seems loyalty isn't very strong among thieves." The betrayal cuts Finch deeper than anything else. He had groomed Peterson, seen him as a protege. To be undone by his own underling is the ultimate humiliation. His empire of fear has crumbled. His allies have abandoned him. His lies are exposed. He is naked, alone, and trapped in the ruins of the kingdom he built. He lunges, not at Harding, but toward the exit, a desperate, animalistic bid for freedom. He doesn't get 2 steps before Agents Miller and Ross move with a speed that is startling. They intercept him effortlessly, each grabbing an arm, and slam him back against the prosecution's table. The impact sends files scattering across the floor. "No," he screams, his voice cracking with despair. "Let go of me." General Harding watches the pathetic display with cold detachment. He has seen men break before, in war and in peace. Finch's collapse is particularly undignified. "We have one more thing for the court to see," Harding announces, his voice cutting through Finch's desperate struggles. "The final nail, as they say." Agent Ross turns the laptop screen so the entire courtroom can see it. He presses another key. A video begins to play. The angle is high, from a corner of a well-appointed office. Finch's office. The date and time stamp in the corner confirm it was taken 3 weeks ago. The video shows Alastair Finch sitting behind his large mahogany desk. Across from him sits Robert Sterling, the businessman. Sterling slides a polished leather briefcase across the desk. Finch opens it. It is full of cash. Stacks and stacks of $100 bills. The audio is pristine. "Is this enough to ensure our problem goes away?" Sterling asks, his voice smooth and confident. Finch laughs, a greasy, self-satisfied sound. "More than enough, Bob. Don't you worry. By the time I'm done with him, Thorne won't know what day it is. I'll bury that soldier boy so deep, no one will ever find him. He picked the wrong town to be a hero in." Finch closes the briefcase. "Consider it done." The video ends. The courtroom is silent, but this time, it is a heavy, judgmental silence. The kind that crushes souls. Alastair Finch stops struggling. His body goes limp in the agent's grasp. He looks at the frozen image on the screen, the image of him accepting a bribe to destroy an innocent man's life. There is nothing left to say. No lie big enough to cover this. It is over. Agent Miller reaches into his jacket and produces a pair of steel handcuffs. The metallic click as he unlocks them is the only sound. It is a sound of finality. A sound of reckoning. He walks around the table and stands directly in front of the broken prosecutor. "Alastair Finch," he says, his voice formal and devoid of emotion, "you are under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to obstruct justice, wire fraud, and accepting a bribe. You have the right to remain silent." He pulls Finch's hands behind his back. The cuffs click shut, a sound that echoes like a death knell through the courtroom. The king has been dethroned in his own castle. Stripped of his power, his dignity, his freedom, all in a matter of minutes. As the agents begin to lead him away, Finch, in a final act of pathetic defiance, turns his head and glares at Marcus Thorne. His eyes are filled with a venomous, impotent rage. He needs to understand. He needs to know how this happened. "Why?" he rasps, his voice hoarse. "Why you?" Marcus Thorne, who has remained a silent pillar of strength throughout the entire proceeding, finally rises to his feet. He looks down at the men who tried to destroy him, not with hatred, not with pity, but with a profound and weary clarity. His voice, when he speaks, is not loud, but it carries the weight of truth, and it reaches every single person in the room. "You never saw a man, Mr. Finch," Marcus says calmly. "You didn't see a soldier. You didn't see a father. You looked at me, and all you saw was a black man from the wrong side of the tracks. An easy target. A stereotype you could sell to a jury." He takes a step closer, forcing the agents to pause. "That was your mistake," Marcus continues, his voice unwavering. "You were so blinded by your own prejudice that you couldn't imagine I might be more than what you wanted me to be. You couldn't conceive that a man like me might have powerful friends. That a man like me might be part of something bigger. Your arrogance was the weapon you used against me, and it was the same weapon that brought you down." He looks at the defeated prosecutor, a man now smaller and weaker than he ever imagined. "It's always your mistake." With that, Marcus turns away. There is nothing more to say. The agents drag the now sobbing Alastair Finch out of the courtroom, his pathetic cries echoing down the hall until they fade into nothing. The fallout was not a storm, it was a cleansing fire. Operation Clean Sweep was swift, brutal, and absolute. The federal warrants unsealed that day were just the beginning. Within hours, FBI teams were raiding the offices of Judge Wallace, the home of Robert Sterling, and the station of the Oak Haven Police Department. Alastair Finch, stripped of his power and allies, collapsed completely. Faced with an ironclad federal case and the prospect of spending the rest of his life in prison, he tried to cut a deal. But General Harding and the Department of Justice were not interested in deals. They were interested in eradication. Finch had been the head of the snake, and they were determined to salt the earth where it had nested. He refused to cooperate further, clinging to a delusional belief that his lawyers could find a loophole. They could not. He was convicted on all 14 federal charges. The judge, a woman with a reputation for being tough on public corruption, made an example of him. She sentenced him to 35 years in a federal supermax prison, with no possibility of parole. His assets were seized, his law license was revoked, and his name became a byword for disgrace in the state's legal history. In a final, karmic twist, his prison assignment landed him in the same cell block as 3 men he had wrongfully convicted years prior. Their reunion was not a pleasant one. Judge Harold Wallace fared little better. His impeachment was swift, his disbarment a formality. He chose to cooperate, hoping for leniency. He detailed 2 decades of corruption, kickbacks, and fixed cases, implicating dozens of local officials, lawyers, and business owners. His cooperation earned him a slightly reduced sentence, 15 years in a medium-security federal prison. He lost his pension, his home, and the respect of his family. He would die in prison a decade later, a forgotten man. Robert Sterling, the arrogant businessman who believed his money made him untouchable, discovered the limits of his wealth. The federal government froze his assets and indicted him on charges of bribery, tax evasion, and money laundering. His high-priced legal team managed to drag the proceedings out for a year, but the evidence, particularly the video of the briefcase, was irrefutable. He was sentenced to 20 years and forced to pay over $50 million in fines and restitution. The Oak Haven Community Fund he had plundered was repaid 3 times over. His business empire collapsed, sold off in pieces to pay his debts. The corrupt lead detective, the court clerks, and the other lesser conspirators were all swept up in the dragnet. Most took plea deals, their testimony adding more weight to the mountain of evidence against their former masters. They received sentences ranging from 2 to 10 years, their careers and reputations permanently destroyed. The Oak Haven Police Department was placed under a federal consent decree, forcing a complete overhaul of its policies and personnel. The fire burned hot, but from the ashes, new things began to grow. Sergeant Marcus Thorne was publicly and completely exonerated. He was hailed as a hero, not just for his military service, but for his courage in going undercover. The Attorney General of the United States held a press conference, with Marcus and General Harding by his side, to announce the success of Operation Clean Sweep. Marcus received a formal commendation and the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his extraordinary service to the nation, both in and out of uniform. As restitution for the ordeal he and his family endured, he was awarded a substantial portion of the assets seized from Finch and Sterling. It was a life-changing sum, but Marcus knew exactly what he would do with it. Sarah Jenkins, the young public defender who had fought so valiantly with no resources, found her life transformed. Impressed by her tenacity and integrity, General Harding personally recommended her to the head of the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. She was offered a position as a trial attorney, a dream she never thought possible. She accepted without hesitation, leaving Oak Haven behind to fight for justice on a national stage. She became a formidable force, a champion for the underdog, forever shaped by the day the cavalry arrived in courtroom 3B. The systemic changes were profound. The convictions overturned due to Finch's misconduct numbered in the dozens, leading to the release of numerous wrongfully imprisoned individuals. The case became a model for the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, spawning similar investigations in other districts across the country. Marcus, with the help of General Harding, used his restitution funds to establish the Thorne Justice Initiative, a nonprofit foundation dedicated to providing elite legal defense for veterans and minorities targeted by corrupt systems. The foundation's first act was to open a new, well-funded public defender's office in Oak Haven, ensuring that no one would ever have to face a corrupt prosecutor as alone as Marcus had been. 2 years later. The building is new, all glass and light-colored wood. It smells of fresh paint and possibility. A crowd is gathered on the steps, a diverse mix of townspeople, reporters, and legal professionals. A banner hangs above the entrance, the Oak Haven Center for Community Justice. Marcus Thorne stands at a podium. He is not in a borrowed suit. He wears a tailored gray suit that fits him perfectly. He looks confident, relaxed, at peace. He is no longer a man enduring a storm, but a man who has learned to command the winds. Beside him, smiling, are General James Harding and Sarah Jenkins, who flew in from Washington for the dedication. They are more than allies, they are family, forged in a crucible of injustice. Marcus looks out at the crowd, at the town that almost broke him, and begins to speak. His voice is the same as it was in the courtroom, calm, measured, but now it is filled with warmth and hope. He speaks of second chances, of the power of integrity, and of the responsibility of a community to protect its most vulnerable. He doesn't mention Alastair Finch by name. He doesn't have to. The ghost of the disgraced prosecutor hangs over the town as a cautionary tale, a permanent reminder of the rot that was burned away. As he finishes his speech, the crowd erupts in applause. He steps back from the podium and shakes General Harding's hand. "You did good, son," the general says, his voice thick with pride. "We did good, sir," Marcus corrects him. Sarah gives him a hug. "Look at you. Changing the world." "Just trying to fix one little corner of it," Marcus replies with a smile. The story of Courtroom 3B became a quiet legend, a testament to a fundamental truth. Arrogance is a prison. Prejudice is a blindfold. Those who wield power without empathy are building their own gallows. They believe their authority makes them invincible, but true strength is not found in a gavel, a badge, or a title. It is found in the quiet dignity of a man like Marcus Thorne. It is found in the unwavering integrity of a man like James Harding. Alastair Finch made the fatal mistake of underestimating his victim. He looked at a soldier, a father, a hero, and saw only a target. He never understood that the quiet ones, the ones who have endured, the ones who have been forged in fires he couldn't imagine, are the most dangerous opponents of all. They know how to wait. They know how to survive. And when the moment comes, they know how to win. Justice, in the end, is not about the loudest voice in the room. It is about the truth. And the truth, no matter how long it is buried, will always, always find its way to the light.